Good morning to you all if you are in the United States, and good evening or good afternoon, depending upon how far east you are relative to us in Florida. I'm Yogesh Joshi. I am the Indian Community Endowed Assistant Professor in Security Studies and the Director India Center at the University of Central Florida. And I'll warmly welcome you all to our very first academic event for the fall semester. Uh, we are really fortunate today to have Jibu and Karthik, who agreed to discuss this very important topic with us today. A few words about the India Center. India Center at the University of Central Florida is dedicated to the study of contemporary India in the US and to strengthen the India-US strategic partnership. The topic under discussion today is of utmost significance. Understanding the ethical dimensions is highly significant given the role artificial intelligence is already playing in the lives of many Indians. But the transformation it promises for all aspects of social, economic, and political life of many Indians. I'm sure this conversation will help us build our understanding of the AI revolution in its entirety and take the debate forward. With that, I will hand it over to Director of Public Affairs, Laila Chaco, to introduce today's speakers. Over to you, Laila.
Thank you, Yogesh. Hello, everyone, and I am very pleased to be introducing our two guests today. Karthik Nachiappan is going to be moderating today's discussion. Dr. Nachiappan is a fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore. He is also a non-resident senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute in Ottawa and a non-resident fellow at the Center for Social and Economic Progress in New Delhi. His research focuses on India's geoeconomics, how issues like trade, technology, and climate change affect Indian foreign policy. Our speaker today is Mr. Jibu Elias. Mr. Elias is an AI ethicist, activist, and researcher. Mr. Elias is the creator of INDIAai, a government initiative under the purview of the Government of India, and he is the responsible computing challenge lead for India at Mozilla. He is widely recognized as the foremost authority on India's AI ecosystem. Today, Dr. Nachiappan will lead a discussion with Mr. Elias on some of the ethical implications with the growth of AI in India. There will be opportunity for audience questions following the discussion between Dr. Nachiappan and Mr. Elias. So please use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen for your questions. Now I will hand it over to Karthik and Jibu to start the discussion on navigating the crossroads of ethics and AI in India.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the India Center for hosting this conversation that I'm going to have with Jibu. I'm really excited for it. We're going to talking about a really important and salient issue, not just in India today, but everywhere across the world. As Laila and as Yogesh mentioned, AI is rapidly transforming economies and industries worldwide, and India is no exception. The AI market in India is projected to reach about $8 billion by 2025. AI adoption is growing across sectors. And Indian research and academic institutions are engaged now in AI research and development. India has also seen a surge in AI startups with significant investments flowing in from global investors. With its vast talent pool, its growing digital infrastructure, and initiatives like Digital India, India is really poised to make a big splash on the global AI scene. That said, risks also exist. Data privacy, security are both concerns. There are ethical considerations regarding bias, transparency, and accountability in AI algorithms. Skilled shortages exist in India in the field of AI, and they also remain other infrastructural constraints in terms of computing power and large-scale LLMs. What we're going to do today is cover all these issues, cover India's AI plans and initiatives, focus on the ethical considerations as AI adoption increases in India, and other challenges and opportunities for Delhi as it tries to balance innovation with responsible regulation. And I'm really happy that Jibu is here to talk to us about this today. So the plan, as Leila mentioned, that Jibu and I will have a conversation for about half an hour or so before we open it up to the audience questions before ending in an hour. So to begin, Jibu, you really have this amazing, varied background and experiences. You are an AI ethicist, a researcher, an activist who is working on fostering the development of a unified AI ecosystem in India. You're the creator of INDIAai. You work closely with government. How did you get interested in AI in India, and where did that journey begin?
Oh, well, you asked a very interesting question, Karthik. But before I start, I wanted to thank the folks at India Center News here, and also great to be having this conversation with you, Karthik. So I think it started with 2 points. One thing is a big regret I have in my life, that I heard about Bitcoin back in 2010, and I didn't do anything about it. I mean, to wait till it is very late, and even then I didn't do anything about it. So there was this big regret that I knew about a technology or something that was, very low in value, that how we have all seen how it blew up in terms of price in the last few years. So this was there, and secondly, I had to undergo a health crisis during that time in around 2016, which kind of put me back into a drawing board regarding career and other things. So that's the time I think I started reading some of these books. One book was Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom. If you if you if the audience, I recommend that book to all of the audience here. And another one was Our Last Invention by James Barrett. So these two books kind of started me thinking, right? And then since I don't come from a coding background, but I do come from an international relations and history background, I was thinking initially the governance and the ethical questions came into my mind even before I finished reading the books, even though both books were ending in so many open questions. So this kind of made me thinking, and when I after my sabbatical, when I restarted my career as a journalist, it's an area where I focused more, then one thing led to another, and I think my interest and the recent development. I mean, we were never expecting AI to, what we are seeing right now with LLMs and all, but one thing led to another thing, and here I am.
You mentioned you didn't expect AI to explode the way it has in India. I want to get to your work with INDIAai, which you created. How did you end up creating that? What was the background and the conditions in India that led to the INDIAai mission? And what are its key prerogatives?
Right. So I was, as I mentioned, I was a journalist in Delhi focusing on AI and emerging technology. So initially the plan was for the ministry and the NASSCOM, which is like the industry body, was to build an AI information portal, where you will give news information and other things. And I was kind of I rather say I was the only person out there who was in that field specializing at that point. So the responsibility came to me, and I remember building it on my personal laptop in one day, the whole website. But then we decided, this is not going to be impactful. We are not providing any larger service to the ecosystem. We started to study a lot, right? We started to look into the challenges in the ecosystem, and we decided we want to move forward as an ecosystem building activity and then mapping and building activity rather than an information portal. So I think that's when things started to change. I think we started to survey the INDIAai's AI ecosystem. We looked into various aspects of thing. We profile all the startups, case studies. This is back in 2018. We were looking at major states, how the states are implementing AI, all those things happening. And by the time the government of India also came up with this AI strategy, which is called AI for all. But down the line, we focus more on how do we unify this ecosystem, right? Rather than what we realize is that things are happening in silo. Phenomenal work is happening in academia. Great support is provided by government, but then there is a gap. Like we don't have an organization like DARPA equivalent in India, so we are seeing a lot of gaps in the ecosystem. So this will lead to we producing annual reports annual ecosystem mapping, then support for academic projects to turn into startups. So we had a whole program called Lab to Market, where if you're an academician, you can come up with this interesting solutions, AI-based solutions you build. We would provide them with a small fund to get started, and then the industry leaders to mentor and support the project. We ran that, and we were doing awards, game changer awards, so many other things. So we were building the whole things, and I think by 2023 the mission was announced, and then the whole program was then elevated into INDIAai mission, which is amazing news. And I think the government plans to inject around $1.2 billion into it, right? Right now, that's happening, and right now the program is focusing more on the mission part. And that's I think during this time is when I also decided to step down from the project last year, end of last year, to focus on writing my book, which hasn't happened yet. So this has been, and it has been a phenomenal journey whenever you look. And the other part is the expectations part. We were never expecting, we all talk to each other, the people in this space, who are doing real impressive work. What will be an estimated timeline for an AGI? How will AI will transform in the coming years? And the interesting thing is, while in 2017 and 18, we were playing with GPT, the early forms of GPT, right? GPT 1.0, GPT 2.0. And it was really fun because it was really miserable what it gave you as an answer. And it was hallucinating. I mean, it was like a junkie, I will call, right? It was hallucinating everything. So we asked GPT back then. It was mostly prompting is you initiate a line and it will fill the rest. That's the way we used it. And it used to give startup ideas to do in Mars. How a group of Peruvian researchers discovered unicorn in Andes. So it was giving totally ridiculous things, and we enjoyed it. But then one day you woke up and there is GPT-3 and Chat GPT, and now how it has transformed the society, democratized the tools. It's in a way it's very impressive what we were able to achieve. I mean, that's the whole AI ecosystem across the world, but at the same time, it scares the hell out of me as well. The pace in which things has progressed.
I want to get to that later in the conversation, but before that, let's just maybe set the India AI landscape clearly for the audience. You mentioned INDIAai. There's also India's AI for All initiative. Can you give us a sense of what that initiative is and what role the government is playing to drive AI in India?
I think India is one of the half a dozen of countries that came up with the AI strategy very early on. And if you look at that, every country had a particular focus. For example, in the early days, the US AI strategy, there was no per se strategy, but we all know how it's looking, right? It's driven by the Silicon Valley, driven by the private sector. And then you have countries like UK coming in and stepping more into AI governance, which is now kind of transferred into AI safety component, and countries like Canada focusing more on AI research and further things. And of course, China is focusing on right there. They came up with their vision 2030, I think 2026, something like that. So what India did was the NITI Aayog, which is like the national think tank, decided to look things differently. So we came up with a strategy called AI for All. And the idea was to build AI tools that will solve, India's socio-economic challenges, right? And as India has been plagued by numerous socio-economic challenges for last 7 decades of its existence, more than that. And so there's a lot of question: how do we use a technology like AI to address many of these things, right? The AI's ability the way we can scale some of the solutions was one of the solutions that really valued by the policymakers. And I think back then we clearly focused on few of the domains, agriculture, healthcare, and education as the areas where we think we want to have more investment in AI. So I think it was a very good starting point by the government. Then I think the government came up with another proposal called the iRawat, which was supposed to be a high performing computing infrastructure that will kind of provide that muscle to this vision that the INDIAai created. So I think that's where the whole journey started. And if you look down the line, I think in 2020, the Prime Minister himself came and said in one of the events, called Race 2020, he said that the idea is India has to lead the market of AI tools, responsible AI tools for the global majority or global south, however you want to call it. Because if you can build these tools in India, then it works everywhere else. And a very good example for that is the UPI payment system we have built across the country, right? How it works, or the vaccination platform India has built earlier on, or the Aadhaar system. So I think that's where India's strategy has been. And if you look at the growth it achieved in the last few years in terms of AI, so in 2014, India didn't have a single AI patent granted in the country. 2014. By 2020, India became eighth in the world when it came to AI patents granted. So this is phenomenal growth. And similarly, Indians are third in terms of academic papers published, research papers published in AI, and many other metrics. Even though there's a significant lag behind the likes of China and USA, the growth which the ecosystem has achieved in the last 3-4 years has been phenomenal.
Can you now also give us a sense of what the Indian private sector and what Indian AI startups are doing in this space, which, as you laid out, has a very clearly development focus on issues like agriculture, health, logistics. How are startups kind of trying to build new LLMs, new models? How are they trying to use the data that's available in India to create new forms of machine learning? And what's driving it? Are they also part of this development agenda, or do they have other specific objectives that they want to get across or achieve through their own AI models?
So what excites me more in private sector is startups, right? That's where I feel the innovation is happening. If you look at India's IT industry, it's been traditionally service focused industry. So and it's still continues to be, even though they are looking into AI innovation, but the real impactful innovation keeps coming from the startup side. So some of the startup, like there is a startup based out of Bangalore called INDIAai, which kind of created this uninvasive breast cancer screening system, which which was comparatively cheaper to what a mammography would cost. So and very portable. Now this kind of technology can be deployed without a large scale hospital setting. A medical professional could carry this technology, go to villages, one village after another, doing the scanning, and if they spot something, they can go to the major city and get it examined furthermore. So these kind of things, this kind of solutions increase the question of access. Access to healthcare has been a big problem for India, and the startup like INDIAai phenomenally did that as well. But on the similarly, another challenge India faces is language. So if you look right now, the language technology is what's driving some of the innovation. For example, Indian language is represented in terms of compared to the population or activity, very unevenly represented on the internet. I think the Indian language like Hindi is under 1% of all the internet, and a language like Thai is around 6%, right? I mean, I don't know the latest answer to that. So what happens is that when you build tools like ChatGPT, which is only accessible in English, how do you ensure that people from rural India, and you have to understand that only less than 10% of Indians speak English, right? How do the others get access? And now when you want to build translation tools, it opens other how do I say, Pandora's box, which is the lack of data sets to train these models on language translation, which you call language corpus. So this has been a big challenge, and that's when I think IIT Madras came up with a program called AI for Bharat, which started to create this open source language corpus for translation. Then the government came up with something called National Language Translation Mission, previously called, and it's called Bhashini, which has phenomenally addressed some of these challenges. So now when you put together this technology and this translation system, you have tools like Jugalbandi. So Jugalbandi, developed by another a startup called Agami. What it does is, for example, let's say I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer living in rural Kerala or rural Tamil Nadu, and I want to buy a tractor, and I have no way of knowing what are the government subsidies I can get. Is there a government scheme where I can, maybe get a cheaper loan to buy a tractor, or is there a price discount? So what they did was, you can use WhatsApp and send a voice message saying, hey, I want to buy a tractor. Now this Jugalbandi, what it did was it used that voice, it translated using the Bashini layer, it translated into text to English. Then it went a ChatGPT API, which is trained on all these government programs and schemes, and provided a questions, which is also in the local language as a voice note. You'll ask questions, right? What is your annual income? Which state are you from? This kind of things. So it goes back and forth as a voice chat on a platform like WhatsApp, and then the end, in few chats, the farmer is given the information. Okay, you can use maybe Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana or this kind of programs to buy a tractor. So this kind of things have been phenomenal, right? There are AI powered apps built for blue collar workers. So it's a way of bypassing the how do I say, the literacy shortcomings in some part of the country. So this is where, like you said, the startup has been doing. And if you ask, is that what motivates the startups? I think these are the kind of the startups people like me or the government itself is promoting. I mean, there are other startups which does other works also, solving other problems in the industry or automating other things. So many other startups helping with automation and many other things. But these are the ones that we feel more impactful, and I think that's where a lot of attention is provided and a lot of support is also provided.
And India is at the forefront of creating non-English large language models for a lot of these different innovations that are coming up. There are some questions already, and I'm looking forward to getting to that in a bit. Before that, I wanted to talk to you about some of the ethical issues involved here. Now, India's former IT minister, Rajiv Chandrasekaran, said that India is determined to have its own sovereign AI. Can you help us understand what that means first? And also, what are the ethical implications of having a sovereign AI?
I think it goes back to some of the notions such as data localization and data governance issues, right? Like, for example, sovereign AI could be something that will reduce the dependence on foreign technology. But that's what fundamentally it means. For example, I think last year, I think a year ago, when Sam Altman made his visit to India, right? He made a controversial statement that Indians shouldn't be focusing on building technologies like ChatGPT, and it was actually taken as what he was trying to do was we should build things on top of it rather than building it like we have already created the GPT. You can now build on top of that. But many of the leaders in India's industry and other areas saw it as a slap on the face. It was like questioning India's ability to do something like that. So I think that's where one of the areas where this idea of sovereign AI developed. I think there's a lot of skepticism around using technology that's built by other countries. Like we have, for example, India has banned a lot of Chinese apps and Chinese games and other things. So it's another way of perceiving like what happens if we are too dependent on these models developed by United States. So how can we address that, right? And there have been efforts already to work around that, but maybe using something like, even though it's not a complete workaround, something like there are many startups and organizations like Servam and many others who use open source AI like Llama, and you don't have to train these things, but rather you look at it to fine tuning them for Indian market, Indian customers and Indian Indian language speakers. So that's one way of building what is I don't call it an essentially a sovereign AI system, but some way of another. But it also comes with a lot of risk, right? Like the risk of reinforcing bias in AI, which is not developed if it's not developed inclusively, right? And ensuring that these systems are developed ethically designed for India's diverse population is crucial, right? And some of the challenges we have seen with AI bias in, let's say, in US, for example, that's race. we have seen a lot of issues with race, right? How Google's AI photo app detected black people as gorillas, or how the Compass was giving an unbiased opinion, all those things. But when it comes to India, it's not race, it's caste. So it opens a whole different way of solving the bias. So I think at many times, we have to think a lot on how many of these technologies will translate into an Indian setting. It's not always as clear cut as you're taking something in English from US and copying something and pasting it to an Indian scenario. But there are so many layers it has to go through. And secondly, I think another prominent minister in India, Nitin Gadkari, has publicly came and said that we won't vouch for self-driving cars, because a big part of India's job sector is dominated by driver employment, right? Truck drivers, car drivers. So they have to come out and say that. So this also add the question, right? How do you balance some ethical questions of, I think somebody also asked about that, about unemployment, or as we call job displacement, and other things around that.
I want to just focus in on the data question and the kinds of data that's being used in India to create different kinds of LLMs and machine learning mechanisms. How representative is that of the larger Indian population? And do you have concerns that, as you mentioned, certain groups might not be included, might not be added? And what are the perils should that occur in a more pervasive manner?
Yeah, so I think this is an area that concerns me a lot, not just because of the bias and the inclusion question, but how some of the startups are procuring this data. I think a few days back, one of my colleagues, Pankaj Mishra, he has written an article on this in India's news broadcasting website, NDTV, about this dark side of data collection. So I will give you an instance. So there is this startup that's getting a lot of hype in India because it's started by this entrepreneur who has started some other startup that has gone well. So his startup reached out to one of my friends who runs a publication. Runs a book publication, and they asked for their titles to train. The organizers reached out to him. They have around 6,000 titles in the language, and they wanted the rights to train these their models in local language by using their books they have published. Now, they clearly said that these books are not completely the rights are not completely owned by the publisher, because the author also has rights as per the rules here. But the rest, and so they can't agree to the request. So the response by this company was that, okay, but you can do that, but what will stop us if you go to libraries one after another and scan these books? So this kind of practice has been very prominent. And considering that we don't have a lot of data corpuses, I mean, as part of some of my research, I've been asking local publishers and local, local journalists how these things are trained, right, in Hindi or any other local languages. Did you get involved? Is your titles were involved in this kind of training? So it's a big question how they are procuring this data. And I think many times when this question comes, many of the data procurement, data training organization, they kind of try to skip this question or work around it. So there is a dark side of data procurement happening in India, which is very unsettling at this point, because at this point the LLM, it's like the California gold rush right now. Everybody is trying to get their hands on it. So that's one thing. Secondly, regarding the question of inclusiveness, yes, the bias in AI not just happens because, let's say, a particular community is has more data, or like, let's say, what happens with Amazon's AI recruitment tool, right? It was trained on mostly CVs of white male engineers, and as a result, it started to pick white male engineer CV as the ideal candidates. But it also happening here not because of a minority solution, but lack of data. Right, lack of data is also about a particular community. For example, there are languages like Gondi, which is spoken by over millions of people, but doesn't have a script. Now, how do that? How does that? That will create a lot of inclusion program. Similarly, a lot of existing, how do I say, conventional wisdom. I don't know what to use the word, or the existing way of doing things in agriculture or healthcare, like Ayurveda, those kind of knowledge sharing is also kind of getting lost, with people more and more depending on ChatGPT. To be honest, even I these days don't Google. Like, that habit of Googling has reduced, because it gives you an extra layer of picking the website rather than you ask ChatGPT, you get the answers, right? So this has created another whole question: what happens to the people who doesn't have data, right? Who doesn't have their data represented in this data set? So that will create another question of inclusion overall as well.
We have a number of questions already, so I'm going to ask you one more before we move to some of the audience questions. One way of dealing with and managing these ethical and political issues that come up is by regulating AI. Now, so far, at least, India has opted for a kind of light hand approach. It's not really, no, it sees a lot of innovation happening. It wants to accelerate that. And it sees that AI is going to play a much greater role in India's future economic and digital transformation. So it's, in a way, it's trying to wait and watch to see how things go. But at some point, some sort of regulation will have to happen. What does that look like from Delhi? Is it going to be a law? Will there be standards? Will there be guidelines? Will there be directives to these startups and firms like Infosys and others on the kinds of data they use and how they use that to develop new kinds of LLMs and then deploy that for various purposes? What is the regulatory future here in India?
I think, from my understanding, is that the government sees some of this risk as very serious issues, right? Like the data issues and many other issues. And I think the thought of the conversation of regulation has been there for last 2 years. And earlier on, there was some guidelines issued by bodies like NASSCOM, which was kind of enough to keep things in check, but then things has progressed furthermore, right? And I think the last election was very interesting in India, considering it's the largest democratic process in the world. We were bringing back dead politicians to give election speech using AI, right? Like, there is this gentleman called Karnanidhi, who was a former chief minister of Tamil Nadu. He was there in the election campaign, who passed away many years ago. So this kind of opened up a whole new area of generative AI affecting the politics. I think what was more popular was, there was this website like covers.ai. I mean, I don't know who made it, but which could make any song or any audio clip into Modi's voice. And it was doing a very, very good job, not just translating the voice, the accent, the pronunciation, the other elements of that, his tone. He has a very recognizable tone and a very strong Gujarati accent, the Prime Minister has. So it was very well doing that. So this kind of tools started to spread. And my Instagram feed was full of Modi singing my favorite Malayalam songs in a Hindi accent. So this opened up so many questions, and this forced government to take some steps, right? That, okay, if you are doing something like that, you need to have some sort of licensing, some sort of guardrails has to be in place, right? So these were some of the preliminary steps India has taken. But at the same time, there is this question, right? Like, for example, we all know that that web scraping, what is happening right now for training these models, and many other way of procuring data may not be something that we all agree with, right? We have seen so many lawsuits in the US. I think the Sarva and Anderson versus Midjourney, or Getty Images versus Midjourney, all these lawsuits happening across the world, questioning on, my creative style is being used by these platforms, or my images were used by these platforms to train the models. But the question is that if you go and regulate it now, all these people who has already done them will have an upper hand, right? ChatGPT will already have an upper hand, and we are seeing OpenAI entering into contracts with New York Times and many other publishers and many other content providers to train their models, right? But if I or you or any of the, let's say a student here want to train, and now you come and say, hey, you know what? If you want to train an AI model, you need to license Times of India or the Hindu or the Indian Express. It's a whole different situation. They don't have that kind of resource or monetary support to do those things. So this raises a whole question, right? Okay, it was okay for somebody like OpenAI to do it, but now you put the regulation in place. but then it kind of prohibits somebody to innovate on top of that, somebody who doesn't have that kind of resource, which is normally the case with many of the entrepreneurs in India. So that's why this question comes. It's not just about innovating. I think there's also a question of fairness also there, right? Like, okay, if the big guy can get away with it, why you put the burden of regulation on the small guy? So these are the things we need to address before having a regulation.
So there are a bunch of questions on, I would say, the AI's real life use cases, right? So, for example, how can AI help youth unemployment in India, or how can AI deal with urbanization, climate change? How do you apply towards the kind of development challenges that India has? Maybe can I want to pick your brain on the unemployment question. Now, there's a lot of talk, especially if you read and consume a lot of AI literature out there, that AI is going to lead to massive unemployment, not just in India, but everywhere, right? And I think it was Jensen Huang, the head of NVIDIA, who said, in a few years, we might not need software programmers at all, right? Because that's all going to be done by AI. That's going to be disastrous for India, especially within having such a prominent IT industry that contributes greatly to its GDP. So what's your sense of the future of AI in terms of unemployment in India and its potential effects?
I think I'll start this question with Jensen Huang, because I'm one of the lucky people who had the opportunity to interview him twice while this AI revolution was happening, right? When they were launching H100 and other tools. So I asked the same question to Jensen. The interesting thing is, right, what will happen, right? So he said, AI has become this massive tool of democratization. You don't need specialized coders. You don't need someone who's sitting in Silicon Valley to build this product. Anyone sitting in a rural India can now build this product. And we are seeing so many things happening, right? Especially with generative AI, right? I have so many friends who are very bad in drawing, but now they are creating these amazing visuals using tools like Midjourney or a DALI or 100 different tools that's out there. But the larger question of unemployment has two aspects, I would say. One is something I've been focusing lately with my work with Mozilla, and something I have written recently on NDTV as well. It's called something called the unemployment gap. The reality is that, according to organizations like NASCOM, is that almost 50% of freshly graduated computer science students in India are unemployable. That's a big question, right? And if you look, you mentioned this IT companies in India, for example, Infosys was paying around 5,000 USD per annum for fresh computer graduates back in 2016. Let's say 5,000 USD, right? Now that price that either has stayed the same, but versus has gone down. I have seen recruitment drives by companies like Cognizant, Tech Mahindra, where the students were offered something between 3,000 to 4,000 USD per year, and with a bond. And what has happened is the market has flooded with this software engineers, and now, of course, it's all about supply demand. Now, the second part is that, yes, there's a huge something I call unemployability gap, or I call the cliff theory, because you have these phenomenal universities like the IITs, the ISC, which pretty much transformed the Bangalore Indian science, IISc. Then triple ITs are there, ISIs are there, all these, and then there you have the bunch of really good private universities. They're all playing their A game, but then beyond that, it's a drop in quality. It's a drop in quality in faculties when it comes to private universities. A drop in quality in resources, even in curriculum. Right? I'm shocked to say that I have spoken to computer science teachers who hasn't tried ChatGPT yet. Right? So this, if you go to tier 2, smaller towns and cities, it's a whole. So that brings a bigger question, right? Now, this kind of now the whole unemployability, the employable question. The globally is that I think Goldman Sachs came up with a report in I think 21 or 22, which say that around 300 million jobs will be exposed to automation. Now, one way, the other side of the argument is that AI creates more new jobs. And I used to propagate that argument till I started to, go to the ground, work more with the universities, more ground level work. But On the other hand, the number of jobs, like World Economic Forum has forecasted by 2026, you'll generate around 2.5 million new jobs by AI, like machine learning engineer. So that disparity is huge. And India's IT sector is, I like to give this Foxconn analogy, right? If Foxconn is known for its hardware, Indian IT companies were doing the same for software. It's essentially we were providing cheap labor, right? Because of the market realities. Now, and so that's why they didn't have any incentive to innovate for a long time. Now, what is happening is, what will happen to the jobs? We have seen a lot of firings in the last few years, like Paytm firing around 1,000 people on 1 week, or many companies are doing that. There are sectors in the economy that have completely vanished in a period of 2 months. So, for example, there is a whole industry of medical transcript writers in India. This transcript taker. So if you have a doctor, these guys will have a live feed where they shadow the doctor and transcribe the prescription. It's completely vanished. It used to be in the call center. So I think the New York Times or somebody published a really interesting article into how the Philippines call center sector is vanished as a result of AI. Now you don't need humans in the service to provide service. So it's a really difficult question, and I don't see an optimistic answer out there, right? Because essentially everyone, every organization is driven by profit and the shareholder value. That means being more, how do I say, efficient and optimizing the output. That means lesser unemployment, more AI. That could be the future.
There's another question here on India's AI infrastructure and what's the state of that? So I'm guessing issues like data centers, compute power, and a big part of that will be having skilled labor force who can man AI. What's your sense of the state of India's AI infrastructure?
So the infrastructure is a very interesting question. So there was this report published by OECD, which was this working group headed by Kate Strainer, also from NVIDIA, which looked into something called the compute gap. How, and it translates. There was this other report by McKinsey in 2018, which categorized countries on 4 categories, right? Like on terms of preparedness, like India was in the 3rd category, right? Countries. So first was the countries that can immediately gain the benefit of AI revolution. Second was the countries that can get the benefit if made little bit effort. But India was in the 3rd category where it requires a lot more effort. And for a couple of years, I was one of the experts with the Global AI Index by Oxford Insights. And every time, you see this data, India is lagging behind in infrastructure, every year. So it's a big challenge for India. And I think the INDIAai mission's one of the core pillars is the infrastructure, compute infrastructure, and as well as skilling as another pillar. So I think we don't have to always focus on building large scale data centers and large scale capacity. Even building small data centers can overall add up to the infrastructure part. But at the same time, also, how do you ensure that the academicians and the entrepreneurs get access to these state-of-the-art tools like H100? And it used to be the other things, right? So that's another challenge out there. So infrastructure has been a big challenge. I think the Indian government is addressing it in multiple fronts. One is the INDIAai missions part. Second is a recently launched semiconductor mission. I think from what I have heard recently, a new foundry is going to be launched in Tamil Nadu, where we will start manufacturing semiconductors, right? So that will be a huge change in how dependent we are on Netherlands and Taiwan for chips so far, right? So these kind of things are how do we say, crucial steps, but how do we accelerate is also as important as this.
There's another question on international standards and rules on AI. I think India has already been working through various frameworks to influence and shape global AI rules. What's your sense on the role that India is playing so far? And do you think India and the US can work together to shape some of these global AI rules, particularly when it comes to issues like ethics and bias and transparency that you talked about?
I think India is one of the founding members of GPAI, Global Partnership on AI, which is which is an AI organization, and I think India is the current chair. I mean, or the outgoing chair, and I think under
Mm.
India's chairmanship, a lot of things happened. A lot of progressive steps were taken in the GPAI, and I think I had the privilege to witness some of the developments that happened in related to that. So that was one of the interesting part how India was able to take the leadership in this group, which is dominated by Western countries, right? You walk into the group, which is mostly dominated by France, US, UK, and India being the sole representation of the global majority, right?
Mm.
And I think that's where India comes into India's role become very relevant. And of course, India is also a part of other works happening in terms of the work happening in UNESCO, the work that's happening with UN's Secretary General's Technology and Mandeep Gill and his team is working on. So there are or in the Bletchley Declaration and other things, right? So I think India has been, I will say, is evolving into a soft power. If I'm using the international relations term in terms of AI, so it's interesting to see how earlier on India has identified its space and occupying that space in the landscape of power balances. But at the same time, yes, of course, India and US has been strategic partners for many years in terms of not just in technology and many other aspects of the economy. And I think there are a lot of areas going forward that requires I think the investment from US, like I think Google also announced some investment and AI related investment in Tamil Nadu recently, and many others. But the question of ethics is that ethics is subjective and it varies according to the
Mm.
culture. For example, if you come and tell a 15-year-old me about privacy, my concept of privacy wouldn't be the same as what a 15-year-old teenager during
Mm.
that time in US would have,
Mm.
right? For me, the idea of privacy was kind of non-existent because you live with your cousins, you live within a larger family, you everything happening, you will be sharing a computer. So it's a different idea altogether. So there are many aspects. Even countries like Japan and Korea, they had two ideas when it comes to AI from a ethics and cultural standpoint of view, right? So it's a larger question how we can evolve a common ethical regulation. I think UNESCO has been doing some incredible work there. Gabriela Ramos and her team, and I think they have also even now they have released a ethics consultation. I think tomorrow is the deadline for that. If you have your opinion, you can give that.
There are a couple of questions on, as I said, how AI can help address issues like climate change and planning in India. Maybe what I'll do is maybe club them together and ask you, what's your sense on the state of AI adoption within government? So, for example, institutions like the military, are they thinking about using AI in some of their practices and operations? And what kinds of constraints exist there when it comes to issues like the use of force, for example?
So the use of AI in military has been happening for a long time, right? We've been seeing autonomous weapons being used. So it's interesting that there was this conversation I was part of where we were suggesting that there should be some sort of a red line that will stop AI from giving, how do I say, recipes or procedures of making biochemical weapons to anyone. But then, we were trying, okay, how do you define in terms of words? So we said, okay, I shouldn't provide answers of or won't help terrorists or rogue nations or rogue groups to make biochemical weapons. Then it asks how do you define all these countries are also subjective, right? In terms of the global scenario. So then we said, okay, AI shouldn't provide anyone, right, this kind of things. Like then there's other question, what about there's a military leader is very senior out there, let's say in Pentagon, who wants to know how AI could do this, he could have some special access. Then I said, then somebody I think it's, somebody in their interrupt said, if it's a military leader, they don't care what kind of regulations they have, what kind of framework we make, they just go ahead. It's a different thing, right? So I think the use of AI, as much as we speak about regulation, the moment military comes in, the use of autonomous weapons comes in, every country will be like, Okay, yeah, we want AI safety, we want AI ethics, but okay, you can't touch that. Let's talk about AI in healthcare. Let's talk about AI in education, right? So I think even if you look at the China's AI strategy, it stems from the whole idea of having this asymmetric advantage, right? The asymmetric warfare strategy they developed, where they see AI as a important tool. I think we can't. I don't think it's will be easy to regulate autonomous weapons, or its repercussions are larger. So no country will be coming out and say, you know what, I won't use autonomous weapons when others are using it. So we have seen that with nuclear technology, nuclear weapons, and many other weapons as well. So I don't think that's happened. But use in public sector, it can solve a lot of problems. I think we have some good examples from India when COVID, the COVID wave was happening in India. I think there was this chatbot that was built in very short period of time. I think it was in a couple of days they built a chatbot through WhatsApp called My Government Corona Help Desk, which addressed many of the myths and the misinformation around COVID. So there are a lot of cases where similarly there is a platform called eParway, which is a kind of provide diagnostics for cataract in India, which is like the largest cost of preventable blindness in India. It is our farmer advisory platforms are there, managing crowd management in Kumbh Mela or large events. So there are so many areas where AI tools are deployed in the public sector in India. So when we have seen from time and time again how it's been helping us.
So we have about 5 minutes left, 5 to 6 minutes. So there's one more question that's come up, and then I have one question to kind of wrap things up. The one question here is, how are smaller countries being heard or represented within the world of AI? And you mentioned the Global South, and India can be a representative. It can voice the concerns and priorities of a lot of developing countries that have very little access or involvement in AI. Is there interest to be that voice of the Global South on AI?
Yeah, I have an interesting story regarding that. There are some very good examples, like countries like Rwanda, what they have achieved in the last few years. There is this whole AI ecosystem, Kenya, Tanzania AI ecosystem, where they're trying to do a lot of work around languages which doesn't even have script to begin with. But one of the interesting conversations I had with one, I think I was giving a presentation in the Commonwealth Office, the Secretary's Office, about how India was using technology during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what happened was there was this lady from the Kingdom of Tonga. She asked me how does the country with a single ISP, internet service provider, she's asking how does a country like mine, where you don't have any infrastructure, could leverage this technology. So it's an interesting question, especially that a lot of hardware requirement is there. And it also bring up the larger problem of inclusion. For example, there is this report by World Economic Forum in 2018, which says that an American household provides a data point every 6 seconds, while the whole of the country of Madagascar only has 6% of internet coverage. So then you're building these tools. How do you say you're building these tools for them as well, right? So it's a big challenge is how smaller countries, how they can represent within the AI growth. But yeah, countries like Rwanda is doing some interesting work as well.
So one final question from me. So I was preparing for this conversation and I was just looking up your work, and your publisher has this interesting quote about you. And they say that Jibu Elias has been described as the Dubai airport of AI research, which I think means that you are connected to this global AI ecosystem, people and developments across geographies everywhere. So you have a really good, solid understanding of the kind of global AI ecosystem and what's happening there. So can you maybe tell us, or maybe look into the crystal ball, what does AI look like worldwide in 10, 15 years? And what does AI look like in India in 10, 15 years?
Yeah, so that's a compliment that's given to me by my editor for my upcoming book. And yeah, we were but it's a difficult question. I don't think anybody could give a right answer, right? Like we never see the language model progressing this fast. But I believe the next phase of evolution will happen in small language models, like with smaller requirement, the fine-tuned models, and a lot of edge computing happening and other things as well. But I also, on the other side, I feel we have reached a saturation point with language models, right? I mean, how far can they go, right? That's a question, right? We recently saw the Apple's announcement, even though none of those are available on your phones, how the smarter Siri you will have, you will get assistants to write your emails. So a lot of clerical task has been gone, in editorial copyright task has been gone, but still the major questions are there. Like none of this has led to an improvement in our lives. I remember seeing this quote by this lady in the internet that I wanted AI to do my laundry and my dishes so that I can do painting and writing. But in turn, AI is now doing painting and writing, and I'm still doing laundry and dishes. So how do we, not end up in a world like that? But in India, I feel a lot of development is going to happen. I think many of the socio-economic challenges we have in terms of access in healthcare, education, I believe education is going to be transformed, and even politics to an extent, right? There are people who are using their AI avatars right now in their YouTube videos, some of the influencers. I thought they were using, so now this is translating into politics, right? Dead politicians speaking. So it will be interesting to see how it will transform the world and India in the next 10 years. But at the same time, I'm extremely cautious about the job displacement fact. But in the end, the pessimist in me want to see a better world.
Well, that
Optimist
was a
in me,
hard
sorry.
question.
Optimist in me, optimist in me.
Yeah. Well, that was a hard question. But I think one thing is true, and as you've told us today, and it was a great conversation. I've really learned a lot. And with AI, I think India is on the cusp of a tech revolution that could alter its social and economic future. And I think we need to be aware of that revolution and see what lessons it offers for the rest of the world as well. So thank you so much, Jibu, for this conversation, and thank you to the India Center for organizing it.
Thank you, Karthik, and I apologize for the disturbance in my internet that happened. India is still not free from some of its problems.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Karthik, for leading the discussion with Jibu today. This webinar has been very timely and eye-opening for me, and I've gained a lot of insight on the growth of AI in India and ethical implications. So I appreciate you both taking the time to speak with the India Center at UCF. And I thank the audience for tuning in and participating. We hope to see you again at our next India Center event. Next month, we have a webinar on US elections and the future of Indo-US strategic partnerships. And we also have an in-person event on making India an advanced economy by 2047. What will it take? So I hope to see some of you at future UCF India Center events. Thank you again.